1, 2, 3, 4, 5. И 5. Bir, ikki, uch, to'rt, besh. 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. 1, 2, 3.
Ras.
Speak, turn it off, turn it off. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Chung. I am so pleased to be here, and thank you for having me be present for this illustrious event. I am the former U.S. ambassador to the Asian Development Bank, and previously I served in the U.S. Treasury Department, as well as on Capitol Hill in the U.S. House of Representatives. I currently am a senior advisor for Potomac Global Partners, a Washington-based geopolitical financial service advisory firm. We have an esteemed panel with us this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce them, provide a short bio, and then let them each speak, and we'll get started. So I do appreciate everybody coming. I'd like to note that we have the president of the Islamic Development Bank here with us. So, Mr. President, I think we'll all try to be on our best behavior. And if you have any questions or if you want to ask anything, please feel free to speak at your leisure. So our panel includes Shuhrat Vafayev, who currently serves as the Director General in the Agency for Strategic Reforms under the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan. He has previously served as an advisor to the Executive Director of the World Bank and IMF, Executive Director of the Fund for Reconstruction and Development of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and Deputy Minister of Investments and Foreign Trade for Uzbekistan as well. He has a master's degree in Construction Business Administration from Moscow State University of Civil Engineering, a master's of science degree in International Banking from Tashkent State University of Economics, and a master's of International Public Policy in Development Economics from Johns Hopkins. So, Mr. Vafayev, if you want to take a few minutes to provide opening remarks, and then I will get to everyone else on the panel.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Thank you. Let me sincerely welcome all participants of today's panel discussion here. I'm especially honored to have His Excellency President of the Islamic Development Bank, Mr. Al-Jassim, joining us. And I hope that through our discussion, we'll be able to explain you the logic and rationale of ongoing reforms of government administration, of overall reforms related to strengthening the quality of the governance in Uzbekistan, which is considered by His Excellency President Shavkat Mirziyoyev as a key part of our transformation, key part of building a new Uzbekistan. I'll be very interested and welcome all your questions and be happy to address them as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vafayev. To my left, we have Mr. Jalilov, who is the founder and CEO of Trade House of Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan and AKI Intergroup in the United Kingdom. Educated in the United States, in Wisconsin, and in Azerbaijan, as well as he studied in the UK at Cambridge and Oxford, as well as in Kyiv at Taras Shevchenko National University. Mr. Jalilov.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, is it working? First of all, I would like to greet everyone here in Tashkent International Investment Forum. Actually, I have a speech prepared in Russian. I thought that people will be here listening in Russian. Yeah, I'm here actually as a chairman of the Trade House of Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan, and I'm welcoming all the questions.
If you want to, do you want to say your remarks, and then we can get...
Yeah, actually, I would like just to say something about the situation in Uzbekistan right now, the economy, and the things done here during this couple years. But I would like to say my speech in Russian because I just prepared it. Okay, if you don't mind.
We have interpreters in the booth, so if people have headsets on or near their seats, feel free to.
So I'll start talking in Russian. And my native language is Russian, so for me it's easy.
Dear participants of the second Tashkent International Investment Forum, members of delegation, Azerbaijan business delegation, as many Azerbaijan businessmen were here, representatives of other and guests of the capital. From the moment of establishment, Tashkent Investment Forum got a merited place and prestigious international organization. A lot of work has been done together on establishing of legal base. Stable investment basis has been created to ensure comprehensive equal cooperation between investment funds and private investors, which enables to expand activity of investors and their participants. I take this opportunity to briefly inform you on changes which is taking place in Uzbekistan for the last years. Under the leadership of Mr. Mirziyoyev, Uzbekistan has taken cardinal new way of development. Lately, in Uzbekistan, huge work has been done to social economic development, liberalization of economy, completely new investment environment has been created, which leads to integration of economy to world community. And fully reviewed and principal new approaches have been established in macroeconomic development. And reforms in the banking system has been conducted, tax load has been reduced, additional privileges have been given, and preventions for investors. The work is underway on liberalization of external relations and improvement of economy, and reducing of taxation, tax procedures, and budget policy. Its innovation rails are built, technoparks are built all over the country, new clusters are appearing. Finishing my presentation, couple of words about reforms this year. On Sunday, there will be main referendum for the basic law, constitution. These transformations are very crucial for new Uzbekistan and modern, initiated by President Mr. Mirziyoyev based on the new course of Uzbekistan and the wishes of people of Uzbekistan. The organizers of this International Investment Forum would like to briefly highlight on the expectations of Azerbaijan businessmen from this forum. First, expanding and strengthening mutually beneficial trade economic cooperation between local and foreign investors is one of the priority issues in introducing of partners of private PPP and strengthening industrial cooperation. Realization of mutually beneficial projects and programs in priority areas of interaction. Dear participants, I would like to express confidence as a result of this second forum. It will facilitate to further expanding our long-term cooperation between different sectors of Uzbekistan and other countries participants of the forum. Thank you for your attention.
Next, we have Aziza Umarova, who is the founder of SmartGov Consult, a Singapore-based firm specializing in Eurasian public sector consulting. She also concurrently serves as the head of delivery unit within the Agency for Strategic Reforms under the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Previously, she has been a visiting research fellow at Johns Hopkins SAIS and the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard. She holds a Bachelor's of International Economics from the University of World Economy and Diplomacy and a Master's from University of St. Andrews. Aziza, if you will.
Thank you very much. I would like to highlight three specific aspects of the subject of our discussion today, and it was about the effective government and to what extent it can be done even more effective because of the ongoing administrative reform. And I have this interesting, I'm wearing two hats because I've been doing consulting or working in the public administration reform for the last 15 years in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan. I was in charge of governance portfolio of United Nations Development Program for more than 9 years, but then also worked in Singapore at the Global Center for Public Service Excellence. So I have this ability to see the changes and the progress made. But recently, with a great pleasure, I also joined the Agency for Strategic Reform, being in charge now of the delivery unit. So what I would like to say is that we are specifically now looking at the very transformative process when Uzbekistan is trying to break away from its past dependency, if I may say so. So we've had always a very big government, as very much the legacy of the Soviet system, the omnipresent government was overbearing regulations in the economy. And it's really a very great feeling to see that there is now a very concerted effort to limit the extent that government is trying to be in the economy. And we've heard today in the morning very good presentation on a lot of initiatives raised by the president about the privatization of the state-owned enterprises. By the way, I have to remind you, the state-owned enterprises amount to 55% of the GDP. That just to give you a feeling to what extent government is very strong, the backbone of the economy. But in the meantime, there is a reduction of the number of the state institutions from 61 to 28. And that is very significant because the more institutions you have, and I would like to actually pass on, if I may, to His Excellency, the President of the Islamic Development Bank, because you mentioned the predictability. The more institutions you have, the more regulations they tend to issue. So the limiting the number of institutions, we by default creating much more nimble and agile government, but then also we limit the number of different regulations that could be readily printed off the government printer in each of these institutions. And within this process, it's very painful, of course, and as in many other places, how to make government that used to be very big a bit more effective, cost-effective, but also limiting its exposure. It's one of the initiatives that I find fascinating is Delivery Unit. Delivery Unit has been for the first time done by Tony Blair in his government, 2001. And since 2001, 35 countries around the world, all the way from Singapore, Malaysia to South Africa, they've created delivery units in their governments. And delivery unit is tracking a very limited number of KPIs, priorities, and measuring. So it's very data-driven, very alien to post-Soviet context phenomena. When you are tracking data, you are using data for improvement of the performance of the government, but then also you're making sure that whatever you are saying is really supported by the alternative ways of verification. So in Uzbekistan, the decision was made to start with very specific priorities in the education, healthcare, and drinking water. By the way, in drinking water, we have a lot of stakeholders in the private sector. And the government approved for us 10 KPIs. For example, the drinking water will be accessible to a new 5.5 million users in the next 3 years. Or the coverage by sewage system in the urban settings will be increased from a certain amount, double. So all of these indicators will be tracked by delivery unit. By doing so, again, instilling the new culture, the new paradigm in the public service in Uzbekistan. And we are planning to work closely with the private sector as a partners, as a stakeholders, as people who has high stakes in these reforms. And the most important here is it's not just the sectors we're taking, but it's, again, the new culture, to shape a new culture and paradigm of decision-making within the government institutions to make it more seamlessly connected, whole-of-government approach, but then also, again, data-driven. I think it also would be important to talk just very briefly what else should be done. At the moment, we haven't reached that stage, but definitely this is something to think about. And this is exactly because there was an interesting quote in the morning about one dose of uncertainty can keep away investors, right? And it's about regulatory quality, regulatory impact assessment. So Uzbekistan will definitely will pave the way, but there is a lot of demand at the moment to talk about how to measure the impact post and the analysis of the legal drafts before they're being adopted and afterwards. OECD countries have done it all. We are not the first ones. But I think there is more and more appetite and interest to see what type of instruments and tools could be used to measure not the after, but rather before a different legislation is being signed on. And it's great to be in this particular time in Uzbekistan. It's fantastic to work with the government institutions that are pushed to, with different horizons, different boundaries. And I have to say that we can always discuss whether glass is half full or half empty, but as a person who remember very well how it was really empty 10 years ago, I definitely see it as a half full. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, we have Izel Agoglu. That's right. Really? I think you're lying. So he's currently the general manager at Coca-Cola Uzbekistan, CCI Uzbekistan. Previously served as a GM for Coca-Cola in Tajikistan and in Jordan and Syria, as well as Kyrgyzstan. He was the chair of AmCham in Kyrgyz, and he studied at Istanbul Technical University. And it's a pleasure to have you on the panel because you being a representative of the private sector, you are going to be one of the true beneficiaries of a lot of the reform that's going to be implemented over the next few years, few months, few days, whatever they can conceive. And so I think you being a willing partner in this is very valuable.
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very glad to be part of such a great community. And it's an honor to speak today and the effectiveness of the governments and the humble role of the CCI, as you mentioned. As many of you know that our company is rather the newcomer in Uzbek market. We are world-class, exemplary privatization. This move has allowed us to grow our business and expand our offerings while also contributing to the nation's economic growth. Let me introduce the CCI and the Coke system in Uzbekistan. CCI is a Turkish multinational beverage company with a global footprint. We're currently operating in 11 countries, it's including the Uzbekistan, and with an employee force of 10,000 people. We operate with the 30 production plants, and serving almost 430 million people in our geographies. In Uzbekistan, directly we have 1,500 people, and indirectly, together with our partners and the distributors, almost 2,000, so total 5,000 people in Uzbekistan in our system. In 2021, CCI acquired the CCBU, that the Coca-Cola Bottlers Uzbekistan, almost $200 million payment to Uzbek government via the privatization. This transaction is set a high record as a best case privatization in rail sector so far. As a significance of the signs of the confidence in the Uzbek economy, we immediately roll out further investment right after the takeover. So far, we invested $40 million to modernization of our plants, and also we are going to having the new investment in Samarkand, which is going to cost $65 million. In addition to creating the jobs, we are committing to sharing our expertise and the know-how with our partners and the suppliers. The government's new Uzbekistan visions is guiding our way in doing so. However, one of the main and the crucial issue, as you mentioned in the morning session, that these transformation periods is no doubt the expectation of the effective and the efficient governance model. There is a clear impact between the effective governance of the regulator, improved interest of the foreigner direct investment. All companies, whether the government or private, should be the subject to equal treatment. I mean the fair competition. World Trade Organization favor one, favor all motto is also irrefutable guidance to us as well. I can confidently say that the human capital in Uzbekistan, in Uzbek administration, has also takes enroll the new Uzbekistan vision, as you can witness. In the times of the rapidly changing economic environment, players with the ability to respond quickly to the demands and the opportunities is the unique assets of the national economies. The more business-friendly approach to national economy performs, the more resilience it will be in turbulent times. One of the key aspects for the business friendliness is establishing the ability to have the ongoing open dialogue with the private sector. Please allow me to underline that the dialogue is the meaningful if both parties, both public and the private, listen to one another and they take actions accordingly. Unless there is no fruitful outcome for the general sake of the economy and the community that we are serving, and the change will fall short. Being responsible to the needs of the real sectors paves the way of the best business practices. By doing, any government can attract more and more investment to the country. It's in its effort to fight against poverty. This is how the victorious circle can be created for an economy that benefits well-being of each and the stakeholders. After having experience of more than 2 decades in a global company and working in different countries, I can say that the investors, especially foreign investors, care about the consistency and the transparency as much as financial incentives, if not more. Investors expect a well-communicated and foreseeable economic vision from the authorities, as discussed today morning. Whether it's newly minted startup or the global brand like ours, meeting these expectations are common. I want to share my key takeaways from the privatization process of the Coca-Cola bottlers, Uzbekistan. I am very positive. We are very positive of the Uzbek government, where apply its professional approach to the privatization opportunities. Be productive about engaging with private sector. Proactive communication is one of the cornerstones of the building trust with the investors. Investors give utmost importance to be heard. Be inclusive and responsive. It's also another part. Official communication shouldn't be understood as the means of the announcements of the proclamations. We gladly saw that the Uzbek authority openness to dialogue during the privatization process. As a responsible corporate citizenship, we appreciate further legislative changes. Being said that, we sincerely believe that the amendments should be address core business problems with the realistic solution offer. For example, traceability labeling in this type of the case. Be transparent and outline the clarified, defined roadmap. It's also another part. Social economic studies said that, which we have conducted for Coca-Cola business. Every dollar that we are investing in any of the country, it creates $7 that economy in average. CCI acts not only according to profit-driven business strategy, but also creating the value in communities that we invest in. Our sustainability commitments for 2030 launched in April 2022 are cornerstones for our sustainability framework, following in depth our existing best practices, which is that the climate change, packaging, water usage, human rights, diversity and inclusion, and definitely the community development. So in conclusion, we believe in that administrating reforms, public-private partnership, and the modern communication channels are essential for creating the successful business and the investment environment. Our experience demonstrates that the privatization can have a transformative effect on the economy, providing more business opportunities, increasing the efficiency and production, and contributing to the treasury. So we look forward to our investment in our lovely Uzbekistan, and it's one of the main topics currently. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So I'm going to start asking some questions. And so the first question I have is for Mr. Vafayev. You know, the president spoke very eloquently about a lot of the reforms being currently undertaken in Uzbekistan. Can you speak a little bit more about the reforms that are taking place right now and what impacts that you expect them to have on the business interests or on businesses in Uzbekistan as well as the people of Uzbekistan? And then I'm probably going to ask you the same question, Ms. Umarova, as well. So.
Well, in fact, the reform program of His Excellency, as reflected in the strategy 2022-2026, is quite broad and basically covers all sectors: financial sector, real sector, state-owned enterprises, privatization, improvement of quality of education, strengthening the health care sector, development of commodity markets. So it's quite a broad agenda of reforms, quite ambitious, but at the same time critically important to achieve the ultimate objective of these reforms. Ultimate objective of the President's vision is to improve the quality of life of our people, of our citizens. We as an agency, we have been established in order to accelerate and add additional dynamic to the current reforms and pushing especially the significant ones, which have important impact on overall economic development, but also on modernization and on industrialization of our economy. And frankly speaking, when we received this mandate and this agency was established, we were overwhelmed and we looked at all tasks we have to address. So we went back to see His Excellency and suggested that probably in the first 12 months, the agency can really make an impact by focusing on certain selected areas of most important reforms. And we suggested that we look, first of all, prioritize reforms which directly impact productivity and growth in the economy. It's agriculture sector, where we have done a lot, but there is a big room for additional reforms, which will ultimately improve productivity and incomes of people depending on agriculture production. It's, of course, reforms of state-owned enterprises and state-owned banks, as is already mentioned. They have quite sizable share of our economy, and without improving performance of this sector, it is difficult to expect that we will be able to sustain current level of growth in the medium to long term. Reforms of good markets, as we call it, or commodity markets, but it goes much beyond of simple commodities. We feel that we still need to work and address issues faced, especially by the private sector companies, in getting access to certain types of resources. It could be raw materials, it could be infrastructure, but in general, the idea is to create a level playing field in the real sector, which would enable then the economy to distribute resources towards most effective producer, most effective user of this particular resource. Infrastructure development, another area. We started a couple of years ago our program of attracting investments in generation, especially renewable generation. And based on and building on this successful experience and pilots, we have an ambition now to bring private sector, foreign investors also to other different parts of and segments of infrastructure. It could be power distribution, gas distribution, roads, and of course, transport sector and railways, airports, airlines, where our president criticizes us for being slow still. And on top of this kind of areas which, as I say, directly impact the economic growth and improvement of living standards of the population, we also focus on two important segments of the social sector. It's healthcare and education. And this is where we have Aziza with delivery unit, and given a very broad mandate we received from the leadership as an agency, a lot of responsibilities, we must find ways more efficient than traditional ways of making decisions, moving reforms forward, implementing them. And so we're experimenting. As Aziza said, we introduced a practice of delivery unit, which is focused now on certain aspects. We are improving our collaboration with all ministries and agencies. And I was extremely and positively surprised when we had first effort of bringing together experts from railroad sector, which is considered not being reformed and very outdated system. But you cannot imagine how enthusiastic people from the railroad company, from our Ministry of Transport, became when we started listening them, when we started floating ideas, discussing them, disputing. And we basically were able, in this very collaborative manner, when our entire office was full and filled with people from different ministries and agencies, to create a really good set of policy measures, which we hope to introduce very soon. Another channel we are now experimenting with, in order to bring more input from the private sector on one hand, but also create a sense of predictability and enable the private sector, foreign investors, our local investors, to plan ahead, is introduction of so-called white or policy notes or policy papers. We have completed mining sector policy note, which will be published soon, which will basically outline all intentions and all policies of the government and of the state in this particular sector, and would enable potential investors to build their investments, build their businesses based on clear indication, clear indicators of where the government and where the state is going in this particular sector. And otherwise, as I said, the reform agenda is very broad. Our role as agency, and we are in a privileged role of being positioned just under His Excellency, under the President. He chairs our board, and it helps us to bring together all ministries, agencies, and develop and ensure implementation of policies much faster than based on usual practices and traditions. Thank you.
that's very comprehensive. And so Aziza, can you comment on that a little bit as well, if you'd like?
I think it was a very exhaustive response
Right.
to your question, so I'm afraid I don't have anything to add.
All right. So a question I have for you then is, you know, with your consulting work, it's taking you all over the world, looking at different economies, different governments, on how they execute administrative reforms at spurring economic growth. Can you comment on what you've seen in other countries and what you think needs to happen here, or what you'd like to see happen, given your role consulting with the agency as well?
I think I would focus just on one thing. And in my view, this is maybe one of the essential ingredients of the success of the reforms in the public sector. And you can feel it when you live in Singapore, but I also worked in Malawi, for example, the third poorest country in the world from the bottom, or I lived also in Guangzhou in China. So I think when you have in a public sector a very competitive workforce, when you're able to attract and retain the talent, that's where your reform really come in place. If you have the rest, but you don't have the high caliber of people working for the government, it's hardly actually yield any results, because everything gets very artificial. So it's about bringing new minds, new mindsets, new vision, new talent, new ambition as well, that actually blend and they make reform happen.
All right. So I'm going to come back to you, because I'd like to talk to you a little bit about absorptive capacity issues, not only in Uzbekistan, but what you've seen elsewhere. So I'll come back to you if we have time to discuss that. For Mr. Jalilov and Israel, from your perspective, being based in, or having, for Ms. Jalilov being based in another country, and Israel for working in other countries on behalf of a Fortune 10 U.S. company, what types of administrative reforms would you want to see in Uzbekistan that would increase your commitment to investment and trade here in this country? So I'll start with Mr. Jalilov and go to...
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not analysis, so to say what we have to be done in this special case, but I would say that for the perspective of investors, we have to consider the things that has to be done, like transparency, probably. The people and investor has to know what to expect from government, and I think most of the thing is for investors is a good macroeconomical climate.
And then that would probably include legal frameworks as well?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I already mentioned, but I'm going to repeat myself a bit. And also, as I said, the right things, that the human capital is also very critical to have it, both sides, I mean, private and the public sector, both sides is very critical to have it, which we are also focusing currently. In my experience, I mean, as we mentioned, that the consistency is very critical. Definitely, we need to have it in other countries, and especially in Uzbekistan currently. Transparency, which we have it currently, but we are expecting more and more. Financial and tax incentives is already reformed, and most probably it is going to be ongoing. Well communicating and the building economic vision, which it's also we would like to be part of it as a private sector, and that's in the additionally proactively communication for us is very crucial, very important, and we need to be having on the mind of those ones. We want to be inclusive tone, which we have it, but we want to have it a little bit more, if possible. And the sustainability process and the project should be encouraged by the government, as we see that today morning, Mr. President also mentioned about the green economy. So we want to also utilize, and we want to be part of it with our new plant and also the current plants. We want to have it as well. And less bureaucracy and improve the digitalization, is also another part that we are looking for it. Here it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Vafayev, I'm going to ask this in a little bit of a silly way, because as someone who's served in government and who gets excited about reforms, policy reforms, initiatives, is there a specific reform item or reform agenda that you are working on with your staff that you're particularly excited about, that you think will have a major impact upon the people of Uzbekistan? And how do you, as you reflect through your tenure, how do you communicate these reform initiatives to the people of Uzbekistan to let them know that these are positive impacts that are going to take place in their lives?
Since this forum is about investments and investors, and the particular topic of our panel is on administrative reforms, I would probably stress the importance of these reforms for our population and for investors who will basically create jobs for our population and improve their lives through that. I think this is most challenging reform in any government and in any country. And we knew from very beginning that just by issuing certain legal documents and reducing the number of ministries and agencies would not mean that from tomorrow, from the next day, the government will become much more compact, much more professional, and much more effective and efficient. It is taking a lot of efforts, but these efforts are concentrated, and these efforts are concentrated towards improving the capacity and strengthening the capacity of our ministries against their much expanded mandate, and enabling and teaching or training these ministries, especially at senior level, to make their decisions and be responsible for these decisions without too much of consultations or deliberations at different levels. At the same time, we see these reforms as important part and important in terms of impact on real sector because they're aimed at reducing the government and government agencies' interference in everyday business activities of state-owned enterprises and of the real sector in general. So in parallel to administrative reforms, we are pushing reforms aimed at improving the corporate governance, improving the transparency, as was said by a number of speakers here already, improving the quality of management at state-owned enterprises and banks, but also setting much higher standards for the entire real sector in terms of accountability, in terms of quality of financial statements, audits. It's, of course, probably doesn't sound very exciting, but this is a technical work which you need to do to establish this competitive, productive, and innovative environment. One probably most exciting for me personally part of this reform is related to the power sector and energy sector in general. And this is a good example when you see how important are the roles of institutions, but at the same time, these institutions have to meet and address the needs of the real economy, real sector in this particular country, in this particular context and environment. and not be artificially introduced. I'll give you one example. A couple of years ago, we were pushing the idea of unbundling the power sector company, establishing the Ministry of Energy, and also the power sector regulator. And there were a lot of discussions and disputes around this regulator. And I personally didn't really believe that we need separate ministry and at the same time separate regulator. And I thought that if the ministry plays policy-making role, then it can also be a regulator. But as the number of private sector players in power sector increased substantially, and the relations which regulate businesses and or agreements which regulate relations between different players in the power sector became much more complex and sophisticated. That's the time when you needed this regulator, which will play a role of impartial body, making sure that all parties, irrespective of their ownership structure, have equal treatment by the policies and by policy institutions, and at the same time they deliver everything which they expected to deliver based on the agreements and contracts between different parties. So I think power and energy sector is important for Uzbekistan, as it's important for sustainable growth in any sector. And while working and pushing all reforms which I mentioned earlier, for me in particular would be extremely interesting and will push forward, especially with extra effort, our reforms in energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jalilov, you're, as an investor, and, you know, what sectors or what areas can you consider investing in Uzbekistan that could spur the type of economic development needed with all the reforms that are taking place right now?
Right now, we're working on proposal to build a new factory for urea and ammonia phosphate. Is one of the biggest factories. So I think this area will be needed too much as if we'll go deeper in this thing, the real need for the government of Uzbekistan for urea is 1.5 million tons per year, and all around the neighbors are also using that carbamide thing to grow up the agriculture and stuff. So I think this kind of big, for me, it's interesting.
Thank you. So, Aziza, you know, we briefly touched upon absorptive capacity, and you know, I'm moderating a panel on youth initiatives, youth education, and increasing opportunities for young Uzbeks. Given, you know, the statistics that were relayed earlier today in the plenary session, can you comment on how some of these reforms that are taking place will have a positive impact upon them and their economic progressions in society?
Thank you very much for your question. There are two things that will definitely have an implications for them, good ones, an impact. First of all, Uzbekistan is trying to establish a professional civil service. And when there is a professional civil service, it's much more interesting place for the youth to go and work. So there is now an official Civil Service Commission that actually is in charge of developing new regulations to make it more stable, more interesting, but also, you know, introducing with the time capacity competency assessments, really make sure that there is a right fit for the young generation. Again, making them more willing to stay and work in the government as a lifelong career. And this is different from what was the case for many years in Uzbekistan. But second is by reducing the government's role in the economy, there will be a definitely surge in the number of jobs created. Only private sector can create resilient middle class. Only private sector can make sure that there is productivity in the economy. And only private sector can make sure that actually there is less vulnerability to any external shocks. So I can give you just an example. If we look at the World Bank figures, they quote that there is around 20% of jobs created by the public sector. So 55% of the GDP are SOEs, and then you have only 20, and I think it's very optimistic, frankly speaking. The number of formal employment is only 20% generated by the public sector. By default, if you reduce, you have much more interesting jobs, better paid for white collars and for blue collars. But again, for that, we need to attract investment and make sure that we are, that Uzbekistan is doing this in the best interest of the local communities. That's what I wanted to say. But in general, again, I think there is, what I really like, I see more and more girls entering, so young women entering the public sector. And for me, it's an excellent proxy indicator for the quality. So it means that they are more interested, they have some career ambition, but also that the system gets much more flexible in terms of whom it picked for the public sector. I see English-speaking, with a good academic credential, people mid-20 entering different ministries. In 5 years' time, I see the same girls, but who are already head of the units in those respective ministers. This is very, very promising and very positive trend in my eyes.
So, you just answered a question that I was going to ask at the end about what do you see in the future Thailand, but I'm going to come back and ask the panel to close out on that question. A representative from Coca-Cola. You have a challenging job here because you have to focus on your employees.
Yes.
But you also have to focus on, government programs that affect your industry or industry as a whole. So, can you speak to the challenge of, focusing on how you look at government reform programs that are taking place here and that impact that it has on your employees and how you try to manage, those types of issues, being between employees and the government?
Yes, you are right. It is one of the important challenges and the difficulties for us when we hand over the company from CCBU to CCI Uzbekistan. Definitely the system was there, the culture was there, but we need to make much more investment on the technology and also at the same time the human capital, because it was not matching what we are looking for, what we have working on most of our countries. As I mentioned, that we are working 10 countries and 11 countries, but Uzbekistan the 11th one, and the technologic fundamental is one of the key elements of our doing business. And the doing business of the CCI is very critical to having the improving of the people capacity and the capabilities. And these are the reforms that we are facing currently in Uzbekistan, just the baby steps, and it is not affecting immediately to the market. And but there's also my colleagues mentioned about the newcomers, new graduated ones. Also, we're trying to having the hiring to the system and improving their capabilities. At the same time that we are working in Central Asia more than 30 years, and we have a great experience in other countries. So currently we are importing the talents from different countries to just matching our standards to the other countries as well. But those reforms that you still going on is not 100% that we can utilize it, but it is going to happen. But we are also welcoming the new regulation, the labor code. As you may know that the 1st of April it's announced and coming to the force. And most of the the new rules of the labor code is already having in our system, in our CCI. So we already utilize it. I can say that the human rights, women rights, and increasing our women, diversity inclusion is very critical one, and giving the rights of the people, it's already in our DNA, and we have it in the long time in our CCI system. Therefore, the new regulation, the labor rights, I'm sure that it is going to be very positively in the upcoming period.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Aziza, you mentioned, kind of like what you see happening in the next 5 years. So I want to ask each of you this question as we close. The numerous reforms that are taking place in Uzbekistan, what is the overall goal, like 20 years from now? Like what type of healthy economic environment do you want to create here? And what positive impact do you see these reforms taking, not just currently, because a lot of these things are time-bound for the future. So what is, in your heart of hearts, what is the overall goal and expectations for economic development, economic growth, and empowerment issues? So Aziza, I'm going to start with you and move down to the right. So if you want to take another crack at that question.
I think it would be better if maybe Shuhrat Wafai will respond first, and then I'll see if I have anything to add.
Okay. Shukran.
Well, this kind of questions are always difficult when you go to a job interview. They ask you where you see you in 5 years from now. Let me try to formulate or to explain you the vision of His Excellency, our President, and his team. 20 years, of course, is a very long period for very dynamic times we are facing, both here in Uzbekistan and in global economy, in global world in general. But I think our ambition is definitely in 20 years, Uzbekistan will be a middle-income country, high middle-income country, I would say, with good quality of life for the citizens and the population. This is a major objective and major goal of reforms to improve the living standards of the population. In order to do that, of course, we'll need to industrialize our economy. So I see Uzbekistan in future as a kind of factory for Central Asia, factory for Eurasia, and maybe for broader regions and areas, given our natural resources, given our human resources, given our industrial capacity, which is already developed now, and of course, given our plans to build efficient and effective governance structures which enable the private sector and citizens to thrive and to develop freely. And of course, this is going to be a country which is extremely attentive to the needs and voices of the population through increased transparency, increased access of the population, of civil society, to the government, to administration, to all state agencies and bodies. So, and of course, environment is an important part of our reforms and development. And in order to make life in Uzbekistan comfortable, Uzbekistan will be much greener, much more energy efficient, and much more water efficient in agriculture and in all other areas where we use water. So, all in all, it should be a much more happier place than even now. Thank you.
If anyone has anything to add to that?
Yeah,
I just want to say what I see now that gives me very positive vibes. 2 days ago, the girl from the presidential school in Namangan, it's this very insignificant, very far from Tashkent town in the Fergana Valley, she was admitted on full scholarship to the UGRAD program in Harvard. And I think she's the first Uzbek who has been admitted without living for several years in US. So she's going straight from Namangan. Within 2 years, 3 Uzbeks from the public schools were admitted to full scholarship to Yale University. And I gave a lecture at Yale 3 months ago, so I've seen this community. All of them are from the public schools. Government keeps subsidizing music schools, so it's very cheap to learn to play piano, and many people have access to this. Government subsidizes sports facilities, so it's easy to go and get trained in any sports. And we have, by the way, a lot of children doing sports because also fascinating Olympics results. It gives me positive vibe. And then the question is, to what extent we continue expanding the investment in the human capital, not to make young generation bulge, but rather make them the dividends, right? And this, in my view, will define the next 20 years. If we understand the value of human capital, we will be absolutely fine. I believe it. I'm very optimistic about the future of my own country, and we all love it. But if we, at some point, decide that something more important than people, we may face the issue of having the bulge that will be very difficult to sustain and keep them happy. That's what I would like to see for the next 20 years.
Izil, do you want to make one last final
Yes,
comment?
I just want to mention that in CCI, that in the center of our vision, that the creating the value. And the creating value is starting from the people, our people, the community that we are working and serving, and also at the same time the customer and the consumer. Therefore, that the human capital, as my colleagues mentions, all of them mentions, that is becoming much more stronger in Uzbekistan. And we are believing that doing business in Uzbekistan for CCI is going to be much more bright. And we are also the member of the Anadolu Group, which is one of the biggest holding in Turkey. And I do believe that there are the other members of the companies of the Anadolu Group is going to be also interested to Uzbekistan, because we are believing the new Uzbekistan and the future of the Uzbekistan. Thank you.
Mr. Jalilov, do you want to make one final
Yeah,
comment?
actually, how I want to see the Uzbekistan in 5 years, I think the most attractive place for investor and people to come and work in the country is taxation. So we have to know all type of taxation and what we have, what we expect from tax. Because I think the taxation and financial and banking system are most attractive one for investor and for business people to come and work in the country.
Well, we're 4 minutes over, so with that, I wanted to thank everybody for attending. Mr. President, so wonderful to have you here. Other honored guests and attendees, thank you very much for participating. I'd like to thank our panel one last time for their remarks and their thoughts about economic growth, economic development in Uzbekistan, and the reforms needed. With that, we'll bring it to a close. And again, thank you all very much for attending.